Hello and welcome to the June edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm Amanda, founder of Cinetopia, and I am here with Jim, my co-producer on this show. How are you, Jim?
Very sleep deprived. Very sleep deprived. New father who continues to be a sleep challenge, but I have managed to see some films. I went to a couple of baby and parent screenings with my young daughter, and we're reviewing one other film which I saw many months ago when I had time to do things like go to the cinema, go to film festivals. So yeah, no, I managed to get a bit more in, but just very tired. But fortunately, managed to get to the cinema a couple of times. So
yeah, and it went well, right? You saw two films in a week at a baby screening, so that they're slightly different, right? So they're sort of for parents. How are those screenings?
Yeah, they're interesting. I think they're good for when you had it. So my daughter's like just short of 4 months old. When I went to these screens, she would have been about 3.5 months old, and they're pretty good actually. I have found out that apparently some of the multiplex chains do them as well. So I think I'll probably just have to do a bit of a tour of the whole thing. But the ones I've been to so far are. I went to see Il Buco at the Film House, and I went to see one of the films we're reviewing today between the two of us, Jurassic World Dominion, at the very recently opened Everyman Cinema in Edinburgh. And basically the idea is that you go along, but you only get entry if you have a baby under a certain age. It varies by cinema, but it's usually something like 18 months or 1 year or something. And the sound is turned down a little bit just so you don't like burst little eardrums, and the lights are kept up a little bit so you can see what you're doing. So if a baby starts screaming or crying in the middle of the screen, the idea is like everybody's in the same boat, so yeah. It's fine. Fortunately, but my daughter, she was a little champ through both of them, slept through about the first 45 minutes of each film, fed quite happily, and then watched the end of it, and she was fine, really. So
go figure, she's a film fan as well, so
well, she's probably one of the very few children in the world whose first visit to the cinema will be Il Buco, directed by Michelangelo Framartino.
Yeah, art house Italian film, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we then went completely the other direction with Jurassic World Dominion the very next day. But it's quite the pair to start with. Yeah.
And I'm glad they turned that down, because I actually just finished watching that film in a room of children as well. And I think some of them ran out. And I could have almost run out in a few moments too. So let's talk about the films that we are going to review on this episode this month. Jurassic World Dominion is the first film that we're reviewing. It's a big blockbuster. There's lots of big blockbusters coming out, and I feel like it's going to be blockbuster summer for me. I've not been to many in years, but yeah. So we are reviewing that film this month. We're also reviewing quite a few documentaries, and the reason why is because it's the Sheffield Film Festival upcoming this week in Sheffield, but we're starting with a film that was, I think, originally at the London Film Festival. It premiered, at least it got its European premiere here, and that is Canon Arms and the Arcade Quest, a kind of genre documentary I quite love to watch, directed by Mads Hedegaard, and then I'll be joined by Amaya Banuelos Marco, who's a programmer and also has been on this program before. We'll be reviewing Pleasure. The film is currently out on Mubi, and across cinemas, directed by Ninja Thyberg. And then we'll be doing a deep dive into the Sheffield Film Festival. So, we'll be reviewing 3 films that are part of that film festival. There's a ton of films. It's a really, really great program for film doc lovers. And that's why we try to run something around it every year. And the 3 films we've chosen to review before the film festival starts, which I believe is on the 23rd. So that will be 2 days after we share this podcast. It will be Swing and Sway by Fernanda Pessoa and Chica Barbosa. I Didn't See You There by Reid Davenport, and Midwives by Snow Hnin Ei Hlaing. And I also interviewed Rafa Cueto from Cinema Attic, who's been on our show before, but they have a really incredible program called Adrift. And I got the fortune to go to one of their analog 16mm screenings of Un Chien Andalou and one of my favorite films, La Jetée from Chris Marker. But they've been doing a program over this course of this month called Adrift, across Glasgow and Edinburgh. So we sat down and talked a little bit about that and their upcoming other programs as well. So that's a big show. Lots of films to review, lots of documentaries to talk about. Let's get started. And we're back. So one thing I must mention is that Cinetopia is doing a tour of our surrealist short film program with live music called Electric Muses. We did this originally, this program in 2020 when we were at the Lee Theatre, and it was actually a few weeks before the pandemic hit, and we were no longer able to do these kinds of things for quite some time. But it's a really wonderful collaborative with myself, Cinetopia, working with the Debutante, which is a feminist surrealist journal. They're local to, Rachel and Molly are local to Edinburgh, and they curated a program of short films directed by female directors over the decades. Germaine Delac, Seashell and the Clergyman, and Maya Darren's Meshes of the Afternoon are featured. And so is Psychosynthesis by Barbara Hammer and You Be Mother by Sarah Pusel. But the first two films, Maya Darren's and Germaine Delac's, we have commissioned some new scores by two amazing musicians who are local to Scotland, Aurora Engine and Bell Lungs. And we'll be touring that in the month of July, which is next month, the 8th through the 10th, in Newcastle on the 8th, on the 9th in Edinburgh, where Hidden Door just was, with a residency of Pianodrome. So we'll be having a very curious and cool space there, and then Glasgow at the Britannia Panopticon. So I hope that anyone listening who's really interested in surrealist film and live scores and amazing electronic music will join us. So you can find that on our website, or at bit.ly/Electric Muses Tour. And please join us for that. And we'll be doing our networking, I believe the 29th of June as well, the last week. So that's next week. So we'll be in Summerhall Courtyard for that. So check us out at either one of those things. But meanwhile, let's talk about the biggest blockbuster. Well, it's maybe not the biggest, because there's like 3 or 4 right now, like out there, Lightyear and Top Gun and Maverick and whatnot. But Jurassic World I have fond memories of Jurassic Park. It's kind of my era growing up. Also, as a violinist, I had to play that score many, many, many times, in an orchestra. That seemed to be the one that they went to. So I remember that quite well. And Jim, just I feel like you will know how to explain, because I missed a few Jurassic Worlds, I think, in there, or a few movies in between that I missed.
So like you, I have a lot of fondness for Jurassic Park. I mean, I think it's probably, to me, it's the perfect example of what a sort of blockbuster film should be. It was kind of one of these films that I associate with my childhood. I think I forced different family members to take me back 3 times. I think to date, it's the only film I've seen 3 times in the cinema on original release. Right? There's other films that I've seen, and obviously there's films that I've seen multiple times, but I think that's still the only one where I've seen it 3 times during its first release in the cinema when I was very young. What this film is, so Jurassic World Dominion, I'm unclear as to whether there's a colon in the title or not. Let's not worry about it. Is the 3rd, and as far as I can tell, final for now film in the Jurassic World trilogy, which kicked off in 2015, I think it was, as one of these sort of legacy sequels, right? So it picked up the Jurassic Park story and sort of, it did that thing that a lot of films do now, where it's sort of a reboot and a sequel, right? So in the world of the film, Jurassic Park happened. Richard Hammond, who founded Jurassic Park, was a pair. Like, it is a whole thing. They're like characters who carry forward, and that film did extremely well. And I mean, basically, it was essentially kind of a redo of the first film. It was a similar idea. You know, there's a theme park, something goes wrong. You know, there's a giant, carnivorous dinosaur that terrorizes everyone. There's velociraptors. It introduced its own ideas. What you made of those ideas, probably varies by individual preference. But basically, over the next two films, the last one was Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and then into this one, it's basically taking that sort of thing to its logical conclusion. So at the end of the second of this trilogy, basically you have dinosaurs in the world on the mainland. They are amongst us. They are amongst us in the same way that you might come across a bear in North America or a shark or something. They're sort of like, they're not things that you encounter every day, but they're out there. They're wild animals. They're dangerous. But people have their own ends for using the technology which has been used to create them, right? So basically, the idea behind Jurassic World Dominion is to, create a, sort of like summer action film type thing, but to also examine the consequences of this. Like, what does this look like? What does it mean? Further overstuffing the plot elements really is you have our main protagonists are Chris Pratt playing Odin Grady and Bryce Dallas Howard playing Claire Dearing, who have carried through these Jurassic World films. Chris Pratt being the Velociraptor trainer. That was an interesting thing from the first film where he trained a pack of Velociraptors. And Bryce Dallas Howard was the head of the park, a park executive. They are now living with Maisie Lockwood, who is a young girl who was created through human cloning, similar to the technology used to create that. I won't lie, I didn't rewatch the second film. I didn't look up the plot for the second film. I remembered this plot element, but her character's carried forward. I think that's it. I'm not sure how much of an impact it has on it. We'll discuss that in a minute. And basically, the main headline thing in this film, compared to the other ones, beyond everything I've mentioned, is it brings back the original lead trio from the first film, right? So in the last film, you got a little cameo from Jeff Goldblum as Dr. Ian Malcolm right at the end, talking about what would happen in this film, actually, and the impact of that. But he returns in this film, as does Laura Dern as Ellie Sattler and Sam Neill as Alan Grant. Of course, they were all in the first film. Jeff Goldblum was also in The Lost World, the second film, and then Sam Neill came back for Jurassic Park 3, and Laura Dern also had a small part in the third one as well. So that's kind of its main thing, and they're off on their own little kind of quest at the side, with kind of, there's a little bit of corporate espionage going on. Whilst Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard basically tried to get their now surrogate, effective adoptive daughter back, effectively, because she is kidnapped at the start of the film. Needless to say, those two strands do eventually come together amidst lots of wailing and gnashing of dinosaur teeth, etc., and globe trotting in this case, which I think is a bit of a first one for one of these Jurassic Park, Jurassic World films. So what did you make of it? There's a lot here. It's 2.5 hours long, which is probably
right. Well, thank you for giving me an overview of what I watched.
Yeah, it's a bit much. It's a bit much, to be honest. But.
Because again, just like the Spider-Man multiverse situation, really didn't know how many Jurassics were in between. But I was a little confused at the beginning and sort of assumed at some point that I was coming into the middle of a story, because it seemed like everyone, it just seemed like everyone, it didn't really clarify why there were dinosaurs amongst people. But I realized that was just sort of expected at this phase.
Well, you didn't pick that up from the exposition dump at the start of the film in the form of a now this video. the most inelegant, look, we'll get into the quality of it. Like I had fun with this film. It was capital F fine as far as I'm concerned. But like the opening is just the most inelegant thing. Like let's make a fake viral video about what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I I really did enjoy the animals a lot. Sometimes the making them quite scary. There was quite a few moments in this film where I was frightened and scared, and I felt like I was on the Jurassic Park the ride or whatnot. And also, some lovely sort of moments and stuff like that where they obviously like make the dinosaurs feel quite loving, and or they sort of follow the dinosaurs as well, instead of just dealing with just the people in it, which I don't really remember that being the case with the original Jurassic Park. Like, you sometimes are just so overall it was really long, but I am such a fan of Laura Dern and Jeff Goldblum, and also the original film, but I think they're just legends in general, that I got into the film enough to enjoy it for the popcorn movie that it was.
Overall, I had fun with this. I enjoyed it. Now, I mean, one of the consequences of getting to the cinema less whilst Fatherhood is still very new to me, is it becomes harder to insulate myself from the reaction to films, right? So particularly if I'm writing about a film or if I'm talking about it on the show, what I have always tried to do is to basically not read anything about critical reaction, not listen to other reviews, right? Not because not because I don't value the other opinions. I go back and look at these things, but more just I kind of want to form my own one in my own personal vacuum to a certain extent, right? I don't want to taint about that. However, it was very hard to avoid going into this film knowing that this has had a bit of a critical kicking. I mean, I think it is pretty much the worst critically received Jurassic film, I think. Like, even more so than the two sequels to the original, which I actually think are okay films. I mean, like The Lost World, I think really has its moments. Jurassic Park 3, I'm a bit of an apologist for. I don't think it's an amazing film, but I actually think it's not too bad. What I will say about the Jurassic Park series, including Jurassic World, is I think you can make a case that it just has got progressively worse since the first film. And in that sense, yes, I do mean that I think there's an argument to be made that Jurassic World isn't as good as Jurassic Park 3. That's probably not a particularly popular opinion, but I have it. At the same time, I think comparing all these films to Jurassic Park is not a particularly helpful comparison to make. We're talking about probably one of the best blockbusters of all time, directed by an absolute legend of cinema. This is kind of, I don't know if it's a particularly useful thing to compare it to. So going into this film, my expectations were reasonably low. I have to say they were surpassed. I had fun with this. I think that there are a lot of problems with it. Like you, I kind of enjoyed, as you should in these films, I enjoyed the dinosaurs. I think there's a lot of different types floating around. They introduce some new ones. There's plenty of callbacks in ways that are, fun, but I don't think are like egregious or anything. What I will say is it does suffer from a lot of the same sort of modern blockbuster stupidness that some films do. Now, basically, there's one. I think the highlight of the film for me is there's a extended sequence in Malta, right, where basically this dinosaur black market is sprung up, and you've probably seen images of this in the trailers. And basically, there's a big chase scene there. It's very good in the sense that I think it's quite suspenseful and well put together. I can also tell what's going on. Like, I think it's a good sequence. My only problem with it is, so the main antagonists for this chase sequence are a new type of velociraptor, which are hilariously called atrociraptors. I looked that up. That is actually what that dinosaur was discovered has been named, so that is actually a thing. But the other thing you learn from watching a lot of these films is dinosaurs have really dumb names a lot of the time. Like, that's an actual thing. The only thing I will say about it is something that removes a little bit of peril from that chase sequence is those dinosaurs are always exactly as fast as they need to be at that point in the scene, right? So at one point, Bryce Dallas Howard's character has been chased by them on foot. Never quite catches her, right? Now, there are attempts are made to justify this, and it happens in buildings and going around corridors, and it's tripping up on things, right? But it never quite catches her. Then she's being driven around in like a Jeep or a truck, and it never quite catches them. And then right at the end, we're on an airplane runway with like Chris
incredible.
Pratt zooming down it on a motorbike trying to get on this plane. I'm sorry, this is not much of a spoiler. It's very obvious this is where the scene's going if you watch it. And still these things are not quite fast enough to like, so which is it? Can they not catch a person like a single, non-athlete woman on foot, or it can't catch a motorbike? Like, which is it? It's just, so whilst I appreciated that scene, the mechanics of that are inconsistent enough to have you going, right, okay, so basically they're as fast as the film needs them to be at any point. And there are bits and pieces like that which kind of take me out of it a little bit, and I think show, in my opinion, maybe a little less attention to detail than some of the better films in this series.
So I really like that scene. I think like like you said, the fact that you kind of take a world tour, like you're going to Malta, I think it was really fascinating. And it kind of brought me into this world of lots of different blockbusters. So like at first, when you mentioned kind of like the market where, they're selling, the different dinosaurs and stuff, it had this little flair of like the canteen scene in Star Wars.
It had a bit of a Star Wars
thing. And then, the car chase stuff felt little Mission Impossible, or, like the Matt Damon films.
The Bourne films.
The Bourne films.
Which there is an argument, there's an explicit call to when, like, because there's a famous scene, I can't remember, I think it's the second one, maybe the Bourne Supreme, or it might be the Bourne Ultimate, I can't remember which one it is, but the one where Matt Damon jumps from one building to another through a window and the camera goes with him. They do that with one of the Atrociraptors, and I've seen a lot of people kind of like rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh my god!" Like, I mean, it's a 2-second shot. I don't think it's a big thing, but yes, it kind of speaks to your point about kind of like it trying to capture the feel of a lot of these sort of
and then you have to remember that this actually randomly dinosaurs, like catching them, like it just like it's kind of in a moment you're like, what film am I in? And my belief was, you had to suspend your belief to believe that they would survive these and the moment with that you mentioned about the motorcycle onto the plane was just hilarious. I thought it was I was like, we're just waiting to see how he was going to survive, because it was just impossible. So I find all of that stuff the same way that like a Mission Impossible, moment where, like the train stops and it's right before, like Tom Cruise's chin. This kind of stuff I was scared quite a few times in this. I find dinosaurs frightening because in Florida, I basically live like with them in our backyard as, or at least prehistoric, animals. Yeah, it was a long, I guess you got your money's worth, if you will, if that's your thing.
I'd like to go to the length, actually, because I do think that's one of the major. I mean, this film has a lot of issues, but like I had fun with it. I think what it does need is it needed to hack off a good 30 to 40 minutes of this script. Like there were at least 30 pages of this that needed shredded, frankly. Like I do think the last half an hour or so is a bit of a slog. I mean, we've got and something. So the director of this film, right, Colin Trevorrow, I think is how you pronounce his surname. I've never actually heard it said out loud, so I'll say Trevorrow. So he directed the first Jurassic World film and this, not the middle one, but he's become the almost kind of the Spielberg type figure for this series of films. And with the greatest of respect to Colin Trevorrow, he's not Steven Spielberg. And I think something that he does slightly differently, this is not necessarily an invalid approach, it's maybe just one I'd respond less to. In his series of films, a greater attempt has been made to kind of anthropomorphize the dinosaurs. Like if you go back to the original Jurassic Park, it's striking like how much Spielberg treats them like the shark in Jaws, frankly. I mean, like, the velociraptors, which have become kind of the the terror upon which all of these films hang, actually, you don't see one for a very long time in Jurassic Park. And, basically the first time you see any consequences of them being, horrendous to deal with, you literally don't see them. That is not what happens here. We've got we have a velociraptor that the Owen character is trained, which he has a relationship with and kind of interacts with. We've got, the T-Rex from the original Jurassic Park recurs through these. Like, this is something which I didn't quite realize until a second watch of Jurassic World, the 2015 one. But the T-Rex that appears in these films, including the one in this film, it's meant to be the same T-Rex from the original Jurassic Park. And it's just things like that I don't quite respond to, because to me it actually feels like the opposite of what the original film was about, which is kind of like it was the whole like the Jeff Goldblum thing, life finds a way, right? It's meant to be, beyond kind of like the big monster movie shenanigans. It's meant to be kind of like about the arrogance of man. You can't tame these things. You can't control these things. It's arrogant to believe you can do so. And it feels at odds with that original film to me. So that doesn't sit. But I think if it kind of got rid of a lot of the other stuff, it probably could have hacked out quite a bit of the script. I mean, like, one thing we haven't mentioned at all is this entire strand about crop-eating locusts that only eat crops from the Biosyn that don't eat crops from the Biosyn Corporation. And that's another callback to the first film. The head of that is Lewis Dodgson, who was the guy who Wayne Knight's character, the guy who plays Newman in Seinfeld, basically the guy who tasked him with stealing the embryos. It's that guy. He's now risen to be the head of this corporation. So it has its little callbacks as well. I think it does them fine. I can't help but think that if you're looking for this to be Jurassic Park, it's not going to be.
Yeah, but I don't think it should be in some cases, because that's too retro in some aspects. I mean, the whole locust thing, I think the first thing it hit me, and again, I didn't see the other films, was Monsanto. It's definitely sort of speaking about a serious problem we're having in the world in terms of food supply and control and whatnot. And I think that some bit of it is, it's about what can be done with CGI and what can be done with movie making, that you can almost mix like The Land Before Time and Jurassic Park together, where you could have had this, back then you had like the animated lovely little dinosaurs and stuff that you loved. And then, Jurassic Park was, like you said, you can't tame, it's not about, the destiny of man to tame something. That certainly was the point of that film. But in this case, I think, who is this for? I mean, it's for young kids. And so, the more...
Well, exactly. I mean, this is I keep coming back to when I think about the reaction to this. Like, do I think this is the best film ever? No, not even slightly. I mean, like, do I even think it's a particularly good film? Not necessarily, no. But I mean, I had fun with it. And I think it does what it's meant to. I think if you look at quotes from the director, I think he perhaps thinks it's a grander and a grander, more meaningful endeavor than it maybe perhaps is. I think there's a much better film in here, and I think if you gave it to a better director, I want to say, I think frankly you'd probably be able to get a better film out of here. Does that mean this film's terrible? No. I mean, I had fun with it. It's not. It's not going to live particularly long in the memory, I don't think, for me. But
I had more attention for this film than I did the last Bond, or honestly, some recent Scorsese film. So like it, it kept my attention. It was cheesy as all get out in certain lines and stuff, but that's what I expect from it. And and the dinosaurs were cute and scary all at the same time. And
I'll take your point on the last Bond film, because the last few Bond films I've been reasonably cynical about in a lot of ways. You and I are going to have a fight on The Irishman one day, though.
No, we are. I'm just like to add that in there. I'm a big fan.
I didn't notice that getting slipped in.
Well, also in throwing out, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Steven Spielberg, everything he's ever done. I can, but I do think some. I mean, there are classic films.
Let's be clear. He's made some shite. I mean, let's be clear. The man's been around long enough and has attempted enough things. There are some films he's made that are absolute effing clangers, quite
Yeah.
frankly. But it's more kind of like, that's one of his ones, which is an absolute classic in my book. And it's a case of like judging these films, which by definition only exist because of that film, against it, I think is ridiculous.
Yeah. Randomly, we both agree that this is okay, and it's worth some popcorn and a trip to the cinema. So
yeah,
join it. Just go if you want, go if you'd like. And on to the next. So the next film we're reviewing is Canon Arms and the Arcade Quest by Mads Hedegaard. You saw this earlier last year, right, Jim? And it's coming out in cinemas.
Yeah, so it's getting released now. I saw it at London Film Festival last year. It was a film that I dropped into just randomly, actually, because it was there was a gap on my schedule and it looked interesting. And I have to say I was very impressed with it. So the who it follows is Kim Canninarm, I think Kubko. I don't really know. My Danish pronunciation is terrible, so my apologies to all Danes out there. But basically, he's earned this nickname Canninarm because he set a record for consecutive hours playing Gyrus, which is a 1980s arcade game, his particular one of choice. And he managed to play 49 hours of it on a single coin, seems to be the term, right? So on one go without running out of lives, right? Because you can earn more lives as the game goes on. And what this film is chronicling is basically his attempt to now play it for over 100 consecutive hours. And basically the kind of the ridiculous lengths that he needs to go to prepare for this, logistics of how you pull it off. Because, anybody listening to us talk about this will be aware of the fact that he doesn't actually play it for 100 consecutive hours, but basically he needs to be able to play it in such a way that he can take breaks and remain in the game so that when he comes back to it, it's still going on, right? So it follows him and Mads Hedegaard, the director. He kind of inserts himself into this community that Kim is a part of, and kind of centers around this place called the Bit Bar, which has all these kind of classic arcade machines and different games. So we meet people who he spends time with, and they specialize in different games and they have their own things. There's a guy who, goes very deep into Donkey Kong, for instance, and, various other arcade games that I can't remember and have not been necessarily familiar with. I like this film a lot. I mean, it sounds fairly kind of, it sounds fairly light and breezy, and by and large it is, but like there is quite a lot of stuff in here about community and building up friendships and what brings people together. And like something that hangs over the film is Kim's best friend committed suicide many years ago, like before this film was shot. And basically he's embarking upon this record attempt. It's kind of like a tribute to him. Thomas was the guy's name. And basically the rest of the community around this arcade bar take it upon themselves to be kind of his support crew and help him with that. And so there's a lot of heart in this film as well. It's not just kind of like gawking at the geeks. I mean, there is a little bit of that, of course, because like these guys are, they're characters, right? And they have idiosyncrasies and the ways that they go about things. But I like this a lot, and basically it follows his attempts to pull that off, and then the attempt and everything that they do around it to try and make that happen.
So I'll preface my reply by saying literally this film is a film I came up with years ago that I wanted to do, but in New Hampshire, I was tipped off to a similar spot called the Fun Spot in New Hampshire that ultimately became part of the film King of Kong, which came out, I think, in 2007, and it has a similar sort of, like deals with a similar kind of world. I am 100% obsessed with arcades from the 80s and those spaces. I think those spaces are really interesting. I think they represent sort of a space where people got together and like connected as friends and, young people or whatnot, and is lost. It's like the malls of America are dead. So like this kind of, when you said, let's watch this film, I was like, of course. And of course, there's this place in Denmark that this stuff is happening, and, equally very interesting, but literally the same plot line I had in my head, with another friend of mine a long time ago and never got to. So I won't give away any of my other ideas for fear that they'll go taken from our vast audience here. But I have to say that, so first and foremost, the Bip Bip bar in its multiple versions in this is on my list of places to, to go visit immediately. As soon as I can get the money to go, I will, because I mean, what a lovely place. And the montage of arcade games and sort of like the narration of that. This is just feeding into like the world that I live in my head. So like this works fine. I've seen lots of like BBC or American VH1 kind of shows about arcade worlds and stuff like that. That being said, I don't think that I was disappointed by this film, perhaps because that's why I had to say of my bias of what I expect, what I've seen, what I love of this world. I think it was well shot. I think the characters themselves as human beings seemed like really interesting people. And I think that I kind of disagree with you, Jim, on how they're represented. I think there was an overemphasis on I think it was in the notes of the London Film Festival where they said like it's they said King versus Kong, but they meant King of Kong meets freaks and geeks. And I felt like it was much more focused on the freaks and geeksness to get kind of a rise out of its audience but I mean, there were moments of tenderness, but I don't think they were enough when you actually looked at the story and the story of these people. These human beings are brilliant, like the ones sort of figuring out. And yeah, I mean, do you think they were sort of dealing with the concept of mental health? And, obviously, like you said, one of his friends had passed away and they were dealing with that grief and whatnot. But I think that that tone of mixing those two did not work well for me. And I thought there was a lot of gazing at the geek in a way that, it didn't, like, maybe it was just the character and how much time they had to film Kim, but Kim seemed like a much more interesting character than what they were giving him. And I thought there was so much focus on this kind of hyper, montage and shots so that we could feel like it was silly. And I kind of felt that was a bit immature. Like, I don't think they were trying to make them look bad, but I think it came across. That's my first point.
I find that interesting because I disagree in the sense that there is a little bit of a, particularly when, each of these individuals is initially profiled, and particularly Kim, right, which most of the film centers on. It does profile them as kind of, oddballs. Which, I mean, let's be fair in the sense of, people obsessed with playing over 100 hours on one arcade machine, like they are to a certain extent. But I think what's quite useful about establishing that is the film then does manage to undercut it. I think in particular a lot of the I forget the name of the game, but the one guy who's playing kind of like the Space Invaders-y type one that's not Gyros. It does get across like quite how skilled these guys are in attempting this, right? And particularly, and then the guy who plays Donkey Kong, like basically the way his mind works is like kind of outlined, and it's fascinating. It's really quite something. So I think what's interesting about it is it needs to set up these geeky archetypes in order to then kind of like peek behind it and say, well, actually, hold on, there's more to them than this. But I don't think it can do that without engaging at the level of, these guys are, they are oddballs. Like they are kind of like strange guys in a lot of cases. And that's fine because of what then comes out of it. And it then, goes into quite how skilled they are at this, how that translates into kind of like a fascinating way that their mind works, and kind of the kind of deep levels of intelligence they have to figure certain things out. And then more importantly, and I think this is the main thing about the film, and I think it's important to note that the director had basically inserted himself into the film, right? I mean, he's not, I can't recall any time where he's like in front of camera apart from maybe one instance. But, you hear him, he's there. It's very obvious that, this is being shot. I think the community that they then build out of this is probably the most important thing the film depicts. But I think the crucial thing here is these guys are all very different. What brings them together is this love of arcade games and the fact that they do come across slightly odd in a lot of cases. And that's kind of what's brought them together around this kind of central community. And they have created something really great out of it. And it's not, and basically when you get to the end of the film, yes, the headline thing is this guy's trying to play an arcade game for over 100 hours. But what you actually start paying attention to is, why is he playing it for 100 hours? To honor his, friend he lost to suicide. Who's helping him do this? All these people at this bar and this community that he's created, and this incredible support network. And it kind of gets to the heart, I think, of how things externally, which can seem a bit odd and geeky, and why are people obsessed with this? Why? This looks really weird. It kind of gets to the heart of why. Like, a lot of the time, it's not the thing itself. It's everything that then happens around it, like the communities and the friends that you find as a result of your obsession with that thing. And I think the film did that very well. But the problem is, I don't think it can set that up as, this is just my view, I don't think it can set that up as effectively unless it leans in a little bit and meets, the London Film Festival audience, if you like. If I think about when this first went at its level of kind of saying, this is a weird thing to be doing. It is a weird thing to be doing. And you have to be a little bit odd to want to attempt that. But it kind of starts to get into, and I think paints a very nice picture of why. Why would you want to do this? And I think that's the key thing for me.
Yeah, but I live, like I said, not just for arcades, but for subcultures of people who are doing things that, like, and I literally said this yesterday before even seeing this film, of people who excel at things that don't require what you would imagine physical capabilities, like, running a marathon, but being able to do this, the amount of, so I appreciate that this film shared a glimpse into this world, and the fact that you'd have to go 100 hours and conceive and conceptualize how you would actually do that with the less men and more men, and and 15 minutes of sleep and the kind of food, and how, that is a feat of in itself. And these are very, like, a lot of actually was really interesting about the data and how it's connected to science, because again, these are very scientific oriented people. They're creating these fascinating sort of like mathematical equations and stuff. So, like, it was very clear to me that they were very smart people. I didn't actually get the impression that they were very different. I never saw a woman, I don't think, in the entire thing. So I think they were very similar kinds of guys. And so, but I don't think it actually, I think it would hit us over the top of saying sometimes, this is what friendships is. This is what, this is what the dream is, and stuff like that. And that was the part I'm trying to say. Like, I just don't feel like the tone for me, like, I could have seen a little bit of Kim after losing, which gave something away. But you know what I mean? Like, there, like, the climax of this film, it didn't rest on him. I think the editing rested on the fact of making it funny, because they expected the audience to find the quirkiness of these characters, and what they do outside of it, to be sort of silly. Like, when we did Some Kind of Heaven, another film I claim to have thought of as well, there is a world again of people who, if you didn't know about this world in Florida, you would find very, very strange, because it is strange. And I thought that the way that tone was, well, while in parts of it were quite dark, I think it handled some of the serious subject matters that they were dealing with in a way that was way more fascinating in terms of tone, in terms of how, and sort of how it lent its view. I'm not talking about cinematography. I mean, I think both of them were shot really well. I think it's just about, you could go on a Michael Moore or a certain type of role and say all of these people are strange, and I don't think either one of these films did it. But I do think that this one went a little bit on the lines of silly.
I can see what you're saying. I think I disagree in the sense that the silliness for me, I think, was more targeted at the arcade gaming aspects, I think, than the people. So I think in terms of showing respect to the individuals it was profiling, I'm of the opinion that I think it did. And I think it did by getting into why they are so obsessed, how they are so obsessed with these arcade games. I think where it leans into the silliness aspect a little bit is the subject of their obsession, right? And I think in the context of the film and meeting the audience where they're likely to be at, I think it did it an appropriate amount. I don't think it poked fun at the individuals. I do think it poked fun at the arcade gaming itself, which in the year 2021, when I saw it, in 2022 now, I think that's fair enough. But as we like to have on this show, other opinions are available.
Yeah. Well, I did really enjoy the moment. I actually really liked the moment where they went and showed the person who came up with Donkey Kong. And again, this idea of like the knowledge and the research that goes in, it shows that there's so much that goes into beating a world record. I'm not quite sure why you'd want to stay up 100 hours, to beat a world record like that. Like that's just not, even though I strongly believe in this story being told, because it's been in my head for 20 years. I think that was really fascinating. I think it's a really fascinating, like opening to the world. And that story should be told, and maybe every decade there'll be a great one, and maybe I'll make the next one. But I have to give it to Mads for making this film and showing me that I need to go to the Bit Bit bar as soon as I can, because that place just looks like, that arcade looks amazing, and we should have more of those and more of these places surviving around the world, as far as I'm concerned. So that is Canon Arms and the Arcade Quest, and it is out. Is it out in cinemas, or is it going to be online, Jim? Do you know?
I think it will be in some cinemas. It'll be a fairly small release, I would think, but it should be out from next week.
All right, out next week.
Actually, no, sorry, the end of this week, actually, as we broadcast.
End of this week in cinemas across the UK, and check it out. So hello, and we're back, and I'm actually now here with Amaya Banuelos Marco, one of my friends and colleagues with Cinetopia. Amaya, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very good, yes. And we're going to be talking about quite a few docs, but also we'll start with Pleasure, which we both saw this weekend. It's currently it was on Mubi, and it's playing in cinemas across the UK right now. It was actually playing in Germany a couple of weeks ago when I was there before, which was interesting. And it's a film by Ninja Thyberg, and it's a little bit of a sort of a coming of age Swedish woman comes to LA to get involved in the porn industry and wants to be the next porn star. And it's a really interesting film, because you basically watch her start her career, how she begins her career. She kind of falls into a house with an agent, if you will. I mean, this is sort of an odd thing to say in terms of that industry, but it kind of shows you a glimpse into the way that Los Angeles porn industry works. What's really interesting about the film as well is that a lot of the people who are in it are actually playing themselves. So there's like a director, a female director, who does a lot of BDSM. She plays herself, and then there's a super agent that the main character, Bella Cherry is what she's known by in film, wants to be part of. And yeah, it really, I mean, a lot of it, we can talk a lot about what the film is actually about, but that's the general gist, right? Mm-hmm. So what did you think, Amaya?
Yeah, I was very looking forward to watching this film, just because it kind of looked like it was gonna give a different look at the whole thing around sex work. And as you said, it has a very classical traditional storyline. We've seen this story so many times in Hollywood films, in films from other nationalities. So the idea of pursuing the American dream, and that if you have ambition and if you're a hardworking person, then you will make it. So we've seen this so many times, but the difference this time is that she wants to make it in the porn industry. And what I really like about the film is that it just has a very non-judgmental look at this industry and at the people themselves. So I think the director has really achieved that. And actually we see that through the different scenarios, right? So because there's obviously, she goes into these rough scenes that she wants to shoot in order to have an opportunity to move up and be the next, I don't remember the term, what was it? The
Spiegler girl.
There you go. Yeah. So in order to be the next Spiegel girl, she has to do the most rough scenes. So when she goes into that's a very tough sequence, actually, when she has to go through in order to make it. So it's just for the people that haven't watched it, it shows how, and that kind of scenes can become very abusive, and the worker is, in this case the woman, is very unprotected. There are no measures in place for her to be protected while working. But also it shows, as you said, that kind of director who's a female director, and she's doing BDSM, and she shows sort of more the caring and consensual way of working in the industry. So I think the director has really managed to show that, and I thought that was really interesting about the film, because with this kind of topics, right, everyone has an opinion beforehand, and very strong opinion. So I thought that was very interesting. Then, to me, beyond everything else, I think it's an important film to watch, because it's gonna instigate a lot of discussion. And for me especially, what I want people to start, or what I want the society to talk more about is about the workers' rights, in this case sex workers' rights or porn actors' rights. And that's really, I think that's really conveyed in the fact that she has to navigate this world where she's on her own, and she doesn't have really the back of her agent when this type of scene happens. So I really like that. I think that's kind of maybe one of the themes that the director wants to talk about, but also I thought that was really important to focus on that rather than the people's motivations to enter that industry, because that was really well made, I think, because we don't know why she wants to be a porn star. We don't really know much about her past. In fact, she makes a joke about, like, her father being abusive, but she laughs it off. So we know that's not true. And she actually speaks on the phone with her mom. So actually she's still connected to her family in Sweden. So it's really good that they directly give away what are her motivations and what's her past, if there's been some trauma or not. And I think that's really good, so we can just focus on the importance of just having workers' rights. The same way as when you work in any other industry, there are policies and there's procedures in place why that doesn't happen in the porn industry, even though at the beginning she's signing all of these documents, but there's not much around her own protection. So yeah, I think it's a film that definitely leaves you with lots of questions, and I love that type of film. So I think it was also very accessible, and there were scenes that were tough to watch, but I think it's really well made, the camera work, that it's not showing you any gratuitous sex or violence. And it really, the camera works really focuses on the actor, who's fantastic, by the way. I think, yeah, we're gonna see great things from this actor. I think it's her first, it's also her debut. So yeah, I think it was really good, the camera work, because it just really conveys the psychological impact of the work she's doing, and just what she's going through, right? And just focusing on other stuff. So definitely you can, I mean, I don't want to say this thing of the female gaze, because it's been said so much, but I think that's also something very interesting about the film, how can you talk about sex and how can you portray sex from a different perspective that is not focused on specifically on the act itself, but more the psychological and the emotions. So yeah, so definitely lots to talk about this film.
Yeah, I think like you said, I think this is the debut of Sophie Winkes-Loggins, who was the main actor in this. Also, one of the people who isn't playing herself. She's playing a role in this, where a lot of the characters, like I said, are people within the porn industry. But also, I think it's the first feature film of Ninja Thyberg, which really shows her talent, and I think also just her way to embed herself within this particular world. And I'm not sure how, and I think I might have read that she had some sort of knowledge of this before, and I don't know all the details of that. But like you said, I think it's a lot about, there's so much about this which is about the industry and the diversity of what the issues are within an industry, which is obviously so taboo to talk about in general, that these kinds of safe, like workers' rights are not obvious. It's not something, this is the first thing you're going to think about. Maybe you're going to think about that in sort of corporation like a bank. You're not likely going to think or expect that this sort of situation, and actually you probably expect this horrible things to happen, and yet to see different sort of aspects of it, I thought was really, really interesting. As well as you said, it could have gone into a romance, and there could have been a love interest, but it wasn't about that. It was entirely about women within this industry and what they have to deal with in order to sort of make it or whatnot. And I found that really fascinating. I also found that really fascinating to see, like you said at the beginning, there were these things that they had put in place in order to sort of make sure that like the organizations or the filmmakers who are making these films are not going to get in trouble. And yet there was so much coercion from the very beginning that was happening from people who kind of, like, as you went through the story, maybe started and became, seemed less of a problem or, a problematic character as some of the other people within the story, where, like you said, there was, quite a few, there were some really aggressive situations that the main character was put into that was really hard to watch, and also to watch her sort of navigate this and whatnot. It was very hard watch in certain parts, but I thought that was just a really interesting thing that is a lot around. I mean, it's specific to this industry. It's specific to something that I didn't know about, but it's also something that's a universal in terms of coercion and the way these things happen especially on sets, and when we think about just filmmaking in general and whatnot. So I thought that was really powerful because you mentioned that mother spot, and obviously the mother did not know where her daughter was, thought that she was in some sort of internship or whatnot, and kind of gave her the advice that pushed her forward, to her career. I thought it was fascinating, actually. I really, for a lot of reasons, I thought it was fascinating, but I thought it was a really, really interesting film. So,
And definitely on the issue of consent, I was chatting to some friends the other day, and we're talking about actually it would be interesting to hear how the filmmaker actually ensured that while she was shooting this film, the actors were feeling okay with the scenes, because even if obviously it's fiction, still is quite, as you said, hard watching. So we know there's this figure of the intimacy coordinator. So I'd imagine, especially the filmmaker, as you said, she actually has a background in this theme. So her first short film is also called Pleasure. So I think that was sort of, this film is sort of like the development of that short. I haven't watched the short, but yeah, she explored that in her first film, and then actually she was in her studies, she wrote a lot around the porn industry, and then she went onto porn film sets as well for research for this film. So she's obviously very well researched and very knowledgeable, and she's done her work in order to make this film. So I'd imagine that she put that in place. But actually it'd be interesting to learn more about how she made the film, and you know, if what things were in place for the actors to feel okay, because yeah, the actor has to go through a lot. So I would imagine that having an impact on the actor. And also talking about, yeah, that sort of impact is very interesting what you said about the mother, because it's true. Like, I think the film has this sort of general theme as well, which extrapolates any industry, which is the ambition, right? And how do you navigate ambition, especially in a capitalist world where, or especially in the arts, in our capitalist society, which is, how much do you have to take on in order to succeed? No? And in this case, in the porn industry, is obviously very rough, very physical, very damaging to the body and to the psyche. But in any other industry, like just being an actor in a regular, film, then you also have to take on a lot. And it's interesting that the mom's sort of advice is kind of, she's meaning well, obviously, like any mom, but is the impacts of that sort of idea of like, you have to be stronger, you have to be stronger and you will make it, because I'm trusting you. And sometimes it seems like parents or society doesn't allow us to break down and just to be vulnerable. And I think that's also a very interesting, very like small tiny detail, but like it kind of resonated. And yeah, how you need to accept any sort of job or circumstance. I wanted to ask you what you thought about the character and how she's sort of navigating this sort of either being submissive or having agency. I thought that was very interesting about the film as well, when she's like, no, I'm fine with being submissive, but then as she moves on in the narrative, she starts to have more agency. And what does that agency involve in herself, but also in the relationship with her female friends as well? So what do you think about that?
The transition that she makes is not necessarily, like a super positive one, if you will, but she kind of gets to a point where, and I'm not giving much away, but I think she gets to a point where she gets, she is ambitious and she does what she needs to do. And we see sort of a change in her character. You kind of see a change in her from being a very, a new person, like this Mulholland Drive kind of, like you said, like sort of, I come to Hollywood and have this dream of what this is going to be, to like the hard knocks of the industry and what happened. I think that there's a lot there. Really, I thought it was quite powerful.
Absolutely. There's lots of unpack, because also at the beginning, when they are speaking about this clause in the contract, which is like, there's nothing as hard as an interracial scene, and that's very shocking to her, which, her first reaction is like, that sounds very racist, and the guy says, yeah, because it's racist. And just the, like, I think the film very cleverly sort of is tackling lots of things that are wrong in the industry. The first one being obviously the denigration of women, and the fact that for a woman to actually make it in the porn industry, they have to go through things that are actually absolutely not okay. Like, we're not going to go into details, but just really hard porn. And to me, the question all the time while I was watching the movie is like, does a man have to go through that? Does a man have to sign up for all of these rough scenes in order to become the next porn star? I don't know, maybe there should be a film about that, but it seems like it's very, very, cut for the men to have this active role, and the women have the submissive. So I think it obviously talks about that, but also all of the racist treatment, how racist the industry is as well. Also, what I found very interesting as well about the film is how it shows the influence of social media, which also remind me to this film that was on movie a few months ago as well, called Sweat. It's also talk about the sort of dependency on that for a personal, in the other film, she's a personal trainer. So yeah, I think that was quite interesting to see as well. Obviously it doesn't dominate the narrative because there's a lot to talk, but yeah, it's really, it has a lot, and I think the more we talk about it, the more we realize there's so much to talk about the film.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with the social media thing. I thought that like was resonated with me in the sense of how intensely reprehensible that space can be, for any woman, and let alone, someone who is trying to make it in the porn industry. And I thought like it was very effective as a part of the story and the narrative. And there's, yeah, like you said, there is just so many layers to it, and I think it's well deserved of getting the recognition that it is. And it's not an easy watch per se, but it's definitely an interesting one, and one that I think we both sort of recommend.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so check out Pleasure. It's on Mubi right now. If you have Mubi, or you check it out at your local cinema, because that's even better. So now it's June, and that in the UK means the Sheffield Doc Fest is coming up. And well, we're not in Sheffield, we're in Edinburgh. But the nice thing about Sheffield Doc Fest is it's the UK's leading documentary festival. And as Amaya and I both really like documentaries, we program together, which we'll be eventually announcing again when we bring back that program. We'll be putting together the doc program for Cinetopia Doc. We're very curious about doc film festivals or doc programs within festivals. You and I went to Berlin and did a lot of deep dive into the Berlinale documentaries. So give us an overview of what you kind of think is happening with Sheffield Doc Fest that you've seen.
I really like the program. Looks very strong this year. Is separated in different strands as usual. So they have the journey, the debates, the international competition. I like when the strands are also simple in a way, because it allows for a lot of discovery as an audience member to just kind of not be put off by a funny or like just very pretentious title, but it's just like, easy words that everyone can understand. I find that quite nice as an audience member. So there's been a few films that we both watch and we want to talk about. And the first one I like to talk about is the documentary I Didn't See You There by Reid Davenport. So Reid is an American film director, and he's actually made a few films before, but the first time I heard about his work was reading an article where he was talking about the difficulties he experienced as a disabled filmmaker in a film festival like South by Southwest, I believe it was. So I think he had his film program there, but eventually he could not go to the festival because accessibility issues, which is, as we both know, working in film exhibition is still a work in progress. And yeah, but anyway, talking about this film, I Didn't See You There. So this is a first-person account of the director's life in Oakland, in California, where he lives, and he's filming from his wheelchair, and he's reflecting, working as a filmmaker, being an artist, and while being disabled. But also he has really nice interesting insights about basically what stems the conversation, what originates the conversation is for him to see a circus pop up near where he lives. And he starts thinking about the freak shows, which, as we know, in the past were a place where people that were considered oddities would be showcased for the public to just to see, to laugh at, and obviously it was horrible. There's a film called Freaks that probably most people have heard about. So that's kind of the example of what it was. So he's reflecting on that while he's also reflecting on his work as a filmmaker. I love this documentary. I never seen anything like this, and I don't think it's obviously very interesting because he's filming from his wheelchair. So in terms of the viewpoint, it's just very interesting, the camera work, because it's not something that any filmmaker normally does. But apart from that, I think it's just a very important film because it really tackles the whole thing about the politics of being looked at, and how he's reframing that gaze as well from his point of view by filming from the wheelchair. But also, obviously, I think, I don't know what you thought, Amanda, but I felt his voice is so strong. Mm-hmm. He's got so much to say, and he's not deterred by the challenges he has every day. And that was so well conveyed, and I thought it was very moving and very powerful. And I think the title really embodies that idea. So I Didn't See You There is kind of like an apologetic phrase that everyone could say when they don't see a wheelchair user and they don't realize they're actually blocking their way.
Yeah.
But he uses this title as well to sort of reappropriate that phrase and uses as a sort of claiming that space back, and sort of highlighting the lack of visibility of people like him, who has lived experience of disability. So I still remember this long shot where the camera work, the editing is really fast and the camera work becomes blurry at times, and then the music sort of adds on that intensity, and it's kind of showing you like how he's navigating the street on his own. And obviously we are in the States where there's lots of cars as well, and just kind of just seeing him going through across, just pedestrian zebra crossing, and just like how challenging that is and how stressful, but also like people blocking his way and not moving, and he having to say, excuse me, can you move, and yeah, I just thought that was really amazing the way he's made it. And I also thought it was very interesting, his conversation with his mom, was he's talking about how he actually wants to start making films that are not about himself, and when is that going to happen, when it's not going to be necessary for him to talk about his experience as a disabled filmmaker. And I thought that was really, really interesting to hear, because I think that's also something running in many documentary filmmakers that are like talking about specific issues that affect them directly, and how do you move away from that? When do you think it's enough that you said enough about it because there's been a change, or if that's going to be your line of work. So I thought that reflection was very interesting. But what do you think about the film, Amanda?
I agree. I think I really liked this film. Like, just to begin with, I think so much about it I liked. But I do think sometimes I'm cautious about personal narrative films. And I think this one was exceptional. I think it mixes both talent and a story that, through the way that it was done, really made you like feel it. And that goes very simply to the way that he filmed it, through like a point of view of the camera, and where the camera goes, where the camera falls, what the camera sees. But also the mixture of, and I know, because I know that Reid directed and filmed this, but also he worked with an editor on this. The way that it was edited, I think the editing was really, really incredible. And I felt very encapsulated with that. I thought it was very interesting, his life story of growing up in Pennsylvania, where P.T. Barnum, and connecting that to the view of the circus, that's currently outside his place in Oakland, but how both those spaces are very challenging for him as a disabled person. It was really like, it was like you said, it was an important film, but it was a really good film, and also a really good story about a creative artist, how and why they become creative artists, how they tackle that within their own family relationships, and how their family views that, but all through the lens of Reid being a disabled artist and a disabled filmmaker. And I think all of those layers make this a really powerful film. But it's an exceptionally great film, and well thought out from the way that it was made.
I think you summarized it perfectly, because exactly that's how I felt. I thought it was very experiential. The way it's made really makes you feel. That scene I was talking about, I was getting really stressed, like I could like, it's as I was kind of experiencing the stress of crossing the street in that from that perspective, and yeah, as you said, it's a film as well about being an artist and the challenges of that. And as you said, he's got the family on the East Coast, and it was really interesting as well to hear how he chooses Auckland, because it's more accessible for him in terms of the transport, in terms of the layout of the city, whereas his hometown in Pennsylvania is not like that, and he'd have to be dependent on his family and being moved around by car. So I thought that was just a great point as well, about how even in the same country, just there's no continuity around access, like accessibility measures, and that's not just exclusive of the States. Obviously, it happens the same in the UK, and I heard that as well from people here in the UK with access needs. So I think the whole, how he's talking about access provision, but also from that perspective of wanting to be a filmmaker, is just brilliant. And I just hope this film gets shown, because that's the problem we see. Like, that's what we are both very enthusiastic about, watching films at festivals, because sometimes it's the only place where you can watch certain films, and this is the kind of film that I don't know if it's going to have a life outside of this festival, and I hope so, because I think it's a really important film, and it's just very interesting and very compelling. So it has, a very general appeal for everyone. It's not exclusive of niche documentary audiences, if you know what I mean. So yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a hard observational film to watch. It was a really earnest, emotional story about about a person, a filmmaker, a creative, and you really got to embody their life. And I agree with you that just one of the things I like, and wish that these festivals had more access in terms of just being able to see all these films more often, outside of just these, industry film festivals. Not that, it's not accessible for the time and period that it is, but when they're shown in certain festivals, like what life afterwards, do these films make? And I think it's important to amplify it, especially in the case that we're doing right now, to say, watch this film, continue to look out and support filmmakers like this, because I can't, I'll be excited to see the films that Reid's done before, but I look forward to, future films that they does. So, yeah, I think we're both in agreement. This was a great choice, Sheffield. So
Yeah,
we like this one a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So take us to the next film that we both saw together, Swing and Sway, also very personal as well. So we chose some personal films, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Swing and Sway is, again, a very personal documentary, and but instead of one point of view, we're going to have two this time. So it's co-directed by Fernanda, Pessoa and Chica Barbosa. And what initially attracted me about this film is that I have watched their short film called Same, Different, Both, Neither, which was premiered at IDFA a couple of years ago. And that short film was conversation the filmmakers had, an exchange of video letters. So I'm very interested about this format of audiovisual letters, and I've been actually trying to see as many films in that sort of subgenre, if you want to call it, as possible, just because, yeah, it's quite it's a very interesting genre in itself. And I think in the last few years there's been quite an interesting there's been quite a lot of films made by women, when previously the sort of audiovisual exchange has been more dominated by male filmmakers, and traditionally it's been more like an exchange of ideas around films and aesthetics. But what I like about Swing and Sway, that I have seen in other films as well by female filmmakers, is that it's a sort of exchange between friends. And in this specific case, what is interesting about the film is that it's made during the pandemic, and it's kind of a reaction of the two filmmakers. They want to communicate, but they want to do it in a different way. And they want to, because they are both creatives, and they want to communicate, but not through the usual forms of communication. So what they do is an exchange of video letters inspired by experimental filmmakers. And the film is visually very interesting, but what I found more interesting, more than the images they choose to portray, which are obviously inspired by these experimental female filmmakers. And I didn't know all of them. I knew some of them, so I could not be like, oh, I see the reference here, which I think is refreshing in some way, because sometimes you're just looking for the reference, where I was just focused on their story, which was one of them is in LA in the States, and the other one is in Brazil. So they are just talking about their experiences in the pandemic. They are talking about being a third culture kid. They're talking about the political climate that they are both living in. So one in Brazil with Bolsonaro, and the other one in the US with Trump. So that was very interesting, because you can totally experience that they come from a place of friendship, where they've been conversing a lot in the past, and this is the way to sort of keep that relationship going, keep that friendship. And I thought, as I said, that the audiovisual material serves more as a backdrop for the conversation, for the story, rather than like the material itself doesn't, like in occasion it really works, as in like it tells part of the story, but it's more the voiceover that tells the story. And for me, what's interesting about this genre as well is how the letters are used as a sort of therapeutic way of artistic self-expression in a way, because letters are usually like a way of you write and you pause and you reflect on what you're writing. And I think that's very interesting in the times we are living, where everything has to be fast. You have to have a reaction straight away. You share things, whereas a letter is that sort of format that gives you a bit of pause and reflection. And I think that's what I found very interesting about the film, because they are actually using this format for that same purpose. Because I think we all remember at the beginning of the pandemic, it was really exhausting. You had to be on the phone all the time, checking that your family and friends were okay. You had to be on Zoom at work, and it was just really exhausted. So like coming back to letters that are old fashioned and just kind of more reflective seems quite like a political act in itself. And I really like that. So yeah, what do you make out of the film, Amanda? What do you like about it or didn't like?
Well, I somewhat agree with you. I think the concept of this idea as just sort of conceptually is interesting. And I was saying briefly before we started talking that it kind of reminds me sometimes of The Five Obstructions, which was a Lars von Trier film, where he sort of took kind of one of his favorite films and sort of then challenged the filmmaker to go back to how, remaking it in different ways and sort of using different sort of obstructions to create that. And so the fact that these filmmakers challenged themselves to be inspired by work but also the topic and the subject matter is very much their lives, like you said, going through a really traumatic period of all of our lives, but specifically where they were, traumatic and intense things going on, like being in the midst of protests in LA, and I mean, there was a lot there in that way, and conceptually that was kind of a very interesting way to take that on. And there were parts of that I really loved, potentially because they responded to sort of that surrealist or, avant-garde kind of filmmaking that I enjoy. I love this one scene in the pool, and I love pool scenes. So, I mean, I love the way that some of this stuff was shot. And, but I don't, if I was to be perfectly honest, it didn't have that thread, did not work for me entirely throughout it. I think it was, the visualness was all over the place, which was the point. I realized that, but I think it took away from some of the letter correspondence stuff that that you were talking about, that was so powerful. And that correspondence and that conversation was actually something I thought was very strong, something that I haven't seen a pandemic film yet really address some of those issues in terms of how are you dealing with your family who might disagree with you, or, or going through this pandemic in terms of politics and, and health and survival and, and all of that stuff. Like these topics were happening in a really intelligent and interesting way, but that visuals kind of just, I think it just it was a little much for me to focus on the topic at hand. That was my impression, because sometimes I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
I agree, and I think it's quite interesting that what you said, because as I was saying, like the letters serve as a sort of like that moment of pause and that space to kind of like, okay, let's take a break and reflect and just process things. And then the visuals, on the other hand, were constant. There was a lot of change. I remember there was a very beautiful scene with very lovely music. Actually, I was like, I really wanted to know what that music was, but then it lasted only a few seconds, and I was like, just stay there for a bit, it's lovely. But yeah, I thought that too, that it was just moving too quickly on the visual side. So yes, I mean, it's this type of films that sometimes, and again, talking about festivals and like the difference of watching a film in a festival and watching it at home and previewing it, is that I love film festivals for the Q&A. I'm a fan of the festival Q&As because it's just an incredible opportunity to really learn about the process, especially when it's a bit of more of a challenging watch, or like a film that sort of escapes your comfort zone, because I watch experimental films and artist moving image, but it's not the genre that I am most, knowledgeable about or most comfortable with. So I feel this is the kind of film that would benefit from that extra life element. But on the other side, it was still really a very interesting watch, and just I feel like now that it seems like it was, it's only been 2 years, but it seems quite far away, that start of the pandemic. So I actually thought, wow, it's only been 2 years and all of this happened. And yeah, it's kind of strange to get back to that moment and actually remember those feelings as well, of how the perception of time. I thought that was quite interesting as well, how they show that, how the days develop, and that sort of like weirdness and awkwardness about how your day goes, and not having a clear perception of the hours. And yeah, it's just interesting as well to sort of watch it now and see how we just at a moment where with us we're kind of back to like 3 years ago, and as if this never happened, and we didn't experience that. And I think we haven't processed still that trauma. And I think this film as well is talking a little bit about the trauma as well of being separated. In the case of the filmmaker that is in the US, she's Mexican originally, and she defines herself as a third culture kid, so someone that is being in different places and doesn't belong anywhere. So there's also that sort of process of, I don't belong anywhere. I'm in the middle of a pandemic and Trump is in office and my friend is like so far away, and this is the only way I am sort of processing this. So I think that the film is also, maybe it's kind of in that way the visuals work towards the idea of we're trying to make sense of the world we live in, which is very complicated at the moment, and we're still processing all of these weird pandemic and very tense political climate, and at the same time we are all living a traumatic experience, and acknowledging that as well, because I don't think we have acknowledged that. We are still processing this.
Totally. And like I said, and repeat and agree, that this is something that was dealing with something in a raw and honest way that I've not seen yet. And really powerful, as you say, looking at it right now, as we've come to the other side, maybe, kind of, not really, and we're looking at what that was all but 6 months ago, or a year ago, or a year and a half ago, like as the time kind of goes forward. So, was visually a little bit intense for me, or if I was sitting at the Sheffield Doc Fest watching this, I would have gone away, especially with the Q&A, like really blown away with like, just the originality and, and the overall piece. Those were quibbles that I have, that are particular to my tastes or whatnot. It was really well crafted in terms of telling that story, their story, but how it, obviously we all lived it in our own locations, in our own lives. So, I would recommend it.
Yeah, me too.
Great. And so finally, you saw Midwives, right? So tell us a little bit about that film.
Yeah, so Midwives is a film set in Myanmar, and is focused on 2 midwives, one who's a Buddhist and one who's a Muslim. And as at the moment, as you know, Amanda, there's there's a conflict in Myanmar. There's the Rohingya community that have been persecuted and displaced, and it's a huge crisis. And actually, as you probably remember from Berlin earlier this year, the best documentary award was to the Myanmar Diaries, which I still want to watch because the directors are unknown. So it was all shot in like phone cameras, and it's by a collective. So yeah, so going back to the film, I really like the premise of the film, which is just focusing on two women who are looking after women and children, and regardless of them being Buddhist or Muslim. So the premise of the film is just beautiful and hopeful, and just an interesting, again, angle to maybe a film that we are going to see more and more, you know, like the kind of film like this. There's a few films about the Myanmar conflict. So but to me the film didn't work so well because it kind of felt too long, and I just felt it kind of its power. But then again, is the kind of thing that I like to learn more about the director and the process. And what I know is that it was filmed over 5 years, so that's a long time. And you actually see, so the Muslim midwife, she starts as a sort of apprentice assistant, and then in the end she has her own clinic. So there's a sort of empowering process, and there's also like, it shows really well the conflicts they have in the clinic initially, where, you know, they don't want the Muslim midwife to treat the Buddhist women, but the Buddhist midwife can treat the Muslim women. So it's quite interesting. It's kind of a microcosm of what's happening out there. And, you know, I am obviously very interested in this type of stories that are, you know, just following a specific character. They're very character driven, and but also focusing on women, and in this type of roles that we don't see much, in this case midwives, or like a caring role. And I think it's a very interesting film, but it didn't really work for me just because of the length of the film, and maybe just kind of is not visually as interesting, and just maybe the story doesn't really give enough for 90 minutes. Yeah. But anyway, very important topic, and yeah, hopefully we'll get, is distributed by Dogwoof, so I'd imagine it's gonna have a run, either festivals or special events. So if you want to learn more about what's happening there and the role of these women, go and check it out when it gets out.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully one year we'll both go to Sheffield. Let's make it a plan to go next year. But this is us saying it starts in a couple of days. You check out their website. If you can make it to Sheffield, do. There's a lot of free events as well as, you know, sort of industry passes and stuff like that. But if you can't make it this time, just, you know, keep it on your radar and think about it for the future, because it really does show the diversity of the kinds of films you'll get there. And I think that's the kind of thing that's exciting, because yeah, there's so many different kinds of docs. We've done 4 with the Arcade Quest as well, Canon Arm and Arcade Quest on this, and they're all so different. So you know, it's nice to see a festival that celebrates that. So definitely check it out. And that's us for the Sheffield Doc Fest preview. And welcome back. I'm here with Rafa Cueto, who is director of Cinema Attic. How are you, Rafa?
I'm very good, very good. I'm very happy to see you and to hear you, Amanda.
Well, it's great to see you too, and hear you. And thanks for joining us on our radio show this month. We talked to you and Alberto quite a few years ago about Cinema Attic, the history and whatnot. But I had just attended one of your events of part of Adrift, and this is what we're kind of focusing on today. One of my most favorite films, Chris Marker's La Jetée, and then Louis Buñuel's why am I messing that up? Un Chien Andalou we're playing on 16 millimeter. It was a fantastic night. So those who got to go, it was incredible, but hope to see more kinds of events like that in Edinburgh, because I haven't seen events like that. So it was really great that you brought that. Tell us a little bit about this program that you've been doing for the last month, and let us know what your inspiration was for that.
Yes. Well, Adrift is a program we have had on the table for many years, trying to bring films that don't find a screen space in Scotland, often looking at new narratives, new points of view, the voice of those who often are not able to show their films, like native people, or simply those who are pushing the boundaries of what is a documentary, a fiction film, or how you tell a story. Those are amazing films. The day you mentioned these analog classics with Chris Marker and Luis Buñuel, that was a great event. Also because the format, we did with Lydia Bilbit, and sitting down, very informal, watch great films, great copies, and I don't remember ever seeing either of these two films. Maybe Luis Buñuel, yes, long time ago, but in original 16 mil. So it's great, and as you said, we are trying to do more of this for the next season, but that is only one event. We have had 16 screenings in between Glasgow and Edinburgh, and there are 5 still to come. 2 this weekend, 18th and 19th in Edinburgh. We have a couple of collections of alternative, experimental, a bit radical experimental short films in Edinburgh on St. Paul's and at CCA Glasgow. And then we have one more screening of our new venture, which is the Craig Miller Film Club, which is kind of informing our commitment to EDI, equality, diversity, and inclusion. So yes, busy end of the season. We have the good friends of PDA, Mario Torrecillas and company in Hill Park in Glasgow, 2 weeks workshop, making a film with the kids, making them reflect on the concept of community, what they like, what they dislike, what they could do to change it. And we have Elena Duque as a privilege coming on Friday for a 3-day workshop in our Craig Miller Film Club. And with all that, we'll finish by the end of the month and we can go for a wee break until next season.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but like you said, you've had lots of workshops. So, and so it's a lot more interactive than just a film festival, for a weekend, and it's over a month. I think both Cinema Attic and Cinetopia kind of share a similar interest in sort of regular programming or programming across certain periods of time versus just one weekend. That's why do you sort of, what is that part of your ethos or whatnot is how you program, right?
Yes. Well, there are different reasons. I was talking to Paul Gallagher, the programmer at GFT, not long ago, and I said, well, cinematic is like a cinema, but without a postal address. So we like that, being busy and having a regular program going on. It helps. I think some festivals struggle to keep the audience and the membership from one year to the other. So they kind of are very active 6 weeks or even less a year, and then they need to rebuild that interest, that momentum the year after. So we sort of try to avoid that. Cinematic was always, and it has always been for the last, it's nearly 14 years now, the regular short film program that we do in different places, pop-up cinema, really relaxed, non-stressful, welcoming event of short films from Iberoamerica. Then we have one retrospective that is called the Catalan Film Festival, now in its 8th edition, which just happens along 2-3 weeks. And we have this outreach, new audiences, efforts, which will be our workshops, our Craig Miller Film Club. We are taking a different approach in Glasgow. We are using the GFT with a partnership, great partner to have, to bring different schools like Hill Park to watch films there. And that is aimed at obviously getting different groups of in a society, those are less represented, to join, to come, and through cinematic be able to express and to talk to their own people. Finally, we have Adrift, which has a mushroom in our timeline. Traditionally, we will have very few events between May and June, and by the 10th of June, we will have finished the season. But we wanted to launch it. There were a few films that were really trying to come out. Los Silencios, Los Conductos, this amazing Indian film, A Night of Knowing Nothing, the Karayalde documentary, Esquirlas, Splinters. So many films that really mean a lot to us, and well, for necessity, they don't find distribution in Europe or in Scotland at least. So it has been a great effort, a bit of a exhausting one, but really watching films of double bills in Summer Hall were very welcome. A piece of advice to other programmers of cinema: don't put an event on the day of the final of the Champions League. Yes. I'm not too sure what was that, but it does. You cannot win against it. But other than that, it was very well attended. Even sunny days in Glasgow, the GFT, we had 2 screenings and we have nearly 30 degrees outside. And still we got a great number of people to come to see Sacred Spirit and to see Sprinters as well. So it's been a great experience. And so far we are looking forward to reschedule it for next year. Yeah, that's a great effort by the whole team, from Alberto, which is still in Barcelona, but programming for Cinematic, and Anna Fedushina, Sam Bennett, Tom Summers, obviously Clara, and so many others, including me, to making this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think we share, even though you're doing Ibero-American sort of programming and focus, I think we share a very interest in different kinds of genres. And I think that's how, and different forms and documentaries and sharing films that wouldn't often come to Scotland and bringing them. So I really see that in your programming consistently. And it's also just a lovely event to go to. I always think a cinematic is a fun time. There's either food, drink, 60mm projectors, gramophone, something there that's unique and pops up in your neighborhood. So you're after Adrift, then do you have some upcoming plans that you want to share, or are we saving them for exciting?
Yes. Yeah. There are lots of plans. Certainly we keep with with lots of plans. The first and biggest one is to break up for the summer holiday. I think our kids have every right to have a memory of their parents, their father and mother as a young kid, and catch up with sleep, catch up with programming, catch up with a few things. So traditionally, July and August, we are closed for events. We are working in the office, and we will be back in September for definite with our short film nights. We are programming. quite a lot of analog activity, screenings, workshops, and everything for next year. See, we can lift up a bit of an analog film club in Edinburgh, at least. The Catalan Film Festival has been decided that we'll go till to the next year, to January and February, just because we have this footballistic thing happening at the end of the year again, and clearly we cannot beat it, not yet. And other than that, there's a few titles already in the list for Adrift. That will be spring, summer 2023. Yeah, enjoying a bit of this. It's been a good year. It's been a long year. It's been still the year of the restrictions and a few problems, and they tend to convince people that cinema is a safe place, or it's a lot safer than other activities like a pub or a supermarket. And slowly, we are seeing people we haven't seen for a long time. I hope that is the trend. Now we have the summer coming. We have the Edinburgh Film Festival. I'm looking forward to that. We have the Edinburgh International Festival, the Fringe, all that overdose of events every day is coming up to Scotland again. And I hope that breaks the lads' resistance and make people understand that we are social animals and we need to gather and discuss.
Yeah. Absolutely. And as you said, it's good for us to take a break in August and enjoy when the world comes to Edinburgh, and at least be able to kind of explore what else is out there and take a little break off of our own programming. I'm really excited about this analog film programs, Analog Film Club. I will certainly be a member of such, and whatever that is. I'm very excited to hear more about it as it comes. Rafa, always really great to chat with you. Thanks so much. And just remind our audience that this will be we'll be airing this on Tuesday, the 21st. So this will be the last weekend of Adrift. And what events should they go see, and how can they find out about them?
The best thing is to go to our website and check it out, cinematic.com. By the 21st, I think we will be over in Edinburgh. No, we will have one last, the 29th, we will be in Craig Miller Film Club. And that will be a free event, and will be Kimuak, our collection of Basque short films. Those who came last time, they found a cinematic event under a completely different audience and premises. So I hope we will welcome everyone to come there. Also, we will be in CCA for a couple of days with an amazing couple of, it's one program of experimental short films that is split into two days. And yeah, that's CCA. I don't remember the days right now. It's 27 and 28th. Check it.
So many events, too many things.
Check it in the website.
Yeah. All right. So cinematic.com, correct? Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So check it out, and also look out for all your future plans coming up in the autumn. So thanks again, Rafa. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. A pleasure always. Good luck.
Okay, well, that wraps up our show. So a big thank you to Rafa for being here. And again, check out Adrift. I think it's this weekend with Cinema Attic in Glasgow. And a huge thank you to Amaya for joining us for reviewing the Sheffield Film Festival and Pleasure. As we mentioned, Sheffield Film Festival is happening in a few days. And I have to put that plug out there for if you like surrealist film and electronically scored music, because we have a great program coming for Newcastle, Edinburgh, and Glasgow with Electric Muses. I'm really excited about that program, and I'm really excited about the collaboration that we put together for that. So check that out as well. Jim, thanks again for being here. Do you have some exciting plans film-wise this month?
I just try and try and continue getting to the cinema, really. I know, like, these baby and carer screens have been absolute godsend in that sense. So I'll try and get to another couple, but we'll see, because I'm actually going to be in the United States for 3 weeks in July, so I don't know if I'll be able to get to much at that point. But I really just trying to watch films, because with a now 4-month-old baby, it continues to be a challenge. It's a challenge that I'm occasionally managing to succeed at, but it's a challenge.
And we will see you next time then, or if we don't see you next month, then we'll see you the following month. And thank you so much for joining us. If you want to follow us we're at Cinetopia Hub on Instagram, at Cinetopia on Twitter, at cinetopiashow.com. Check us out and also see you next month.